Everyone, how are you doing? So I'm Ravi Govender from Nedbank, and it gives me great pleasure to commence this panel with some really interesting colleagues on the line from various organizations. And today we're going to be talking to you a little bit around the role of chatbots and natural language interfaces in terms of driving the use of digital platforms and driving adoptions and stickiness in those platforms. As I mentioned, I'm from Nedbank and I head up the conversational banking piece at Nedbank, a Southern African full-scale bank where we have successfully implemented both live chat and digital assistants. And we're seeing tremendous take-up and engagement on that. And so we're quite excited about the role that chat assistants have already played within our transactional platforms and how we can actually expand that into other areas of our engagements with our customers, as well as our colleagues. So to introduce themselves, I'll turn it over to George first.
Hey everyone, George Trad. I'm the SVP of Product at Casisto. Quick background on Casisto for anyone that doesn't know us. We're leaders in conversational AI focused exclusively on financial services. Our intelligent digital assistants, Kai, are live in 16 different countries, including 10 countries across Africa. Kai is deployed by financial institutions of all sizes, used by millions on a daily basis. And I'm based out of London, and we have offices in New York, Singapore, and South Africa. Pleasure to be on this panel.
Thanks. Let me turn it over to Sipo.
Hey everyone, I'm Sipo from MTN. So we're a telco business in South Africa. I'm specifically responsible as a platform manager for the chat platform. So we were the first, among the first rather, in Africa to introduce chatbots into one of the social mediums, which is WhatsApp, as a telco, and we are currently looking at expanding on this functionality throughout our digital journeys for different services on our side. Yeah, so looking forward to the chat and getting insight from the panel.
And a very warm-looking Kosi.
Hi everyone. Yeah, it's a bit cold up in here. So as you can see, my name is Kosi Molefe. You can see my organization in the back. I'm part of Standard Bank. In the same realm as Ravi of financial services. I am basically the lead for resilience engineer for employee experience, where obviously I think most interesting thing about my role is that it's a free reign role. So I'm introducing things like AI ops and how we can actually use conversational AI to really resolve certain issues that are happening before it actually even hits our ITSM service desk, and how we can actually sort those things out. I mean, I've got a long career within mostly these new age technologies, and yeah, and I'm interested in engaging the panel today.
Thanks a lot, guys. So as the person asked to sort of set the topic, I decided to be quite provocative in the topic, and I kind of said to myself, well, the topic I'd like to put across, or the question or hypothesis, is that natural language user interfaces are really the best user interfaces for digital platforms going forward. So, agree or disagree, I'd love to hear the thoughts, but more importantly, I'd love to understand your thoughts on where do you feel these digital assistant and natural language capabilities have gone to in terms of being able to really drive engagement with users, and where do you think there are still gaps to be filled? So George, given that this is on the practitioner side, your day-to-day, let's kick off with you.
Sure. So, I mean, digital assistants have come a long way in their ability to understand human language. At Casisto, we're effectively consistently deploying assistants to financial institutions that start with both coverage and accuracy of over 80% from day one, right? And these assistants are really engaging in human-like conversations, effectively fulfilling customer needs in the moment, right? But there are pain points with that customer experience today. And as we see with most chatbot today, really just there's three characteristics here that we've identified as important pain points that we've worked heads on resolving. As we see it, most chatbots today are opaque, they're impersonal, they're reactive. They're opaque in the sense that there's this little black box sitting in the bottom right-hand corner of a website. It usually greets you with the generic, hey, how can I help you? If Ravi and me ask the same question, we'll likely get the same answer back, right? And if it happens not to understand us, we'll be frustrated, we'll perceive it as dumb, we probably won't come back. And recognizing those 3 pain points, we've really invested heavily at Casisto in addressing them heads on and focusing on capabilities that are going to make our assistants discoverable, personalized, engaging. And we do that by effectively letting people know what this assistant is good at doing upfront. Talking about what things are trending and being asked most frequently. Following up, ensuring that there's the right follow-ups in those questions. We personalize the experience by attempting to anticipate the person's need and giving them a way of fulfilling it. And then we try to take everything that we've learned about the interactions that this person is having with that assistant to re-engage intelligently with the right piece of content at the right time. And these are just some of the ways that we're effectively trying to address this and really just elevate the game of those digital assistants and address those pain points.
As you've mentioned, you guys are amongst the first on the continent in the MNO space to put this into third-party platforms. Your views on that and how the capabilities of natural language have potentially shaped the engagement with your customers?
Yeah, ours is an interesting story. So it's interesting that you are more biased towards it being the best interface, right? And what we've learned over time in our space is that natural language is more than just voice or words. And how you structure a conversation. And I wouldn't say we've learned that the hard way, but we've learned that over time. If you look at basic human communication, we have multiple modalities, right? So you can tell my tone, you can tell my body language, right? In terms of, okay, this is what I mean. It's not just the words. So without all those modalities being in place, natural language itself within our digital platform is not as effective. It's an easier interface to interact with, but not the message is not as clear as it would be otherwise if I were there with you, Ravi. And as you are looking at me now, you can tell, right? You can see my hand movements, right, as I'm doing it now. With the natural language progression, all you have is just the words. So we've kind of have taken a hybrid approach in building these experiences where we have almost rule-based type of bot where we structure the conversation and we map it out. And it's almost predicting what the user will ask next, so that the chances of our bots answering this correctly is maximized, right? But over time, as the bot learns, we are moving into more natural language understanding, but this is based on the input of the conversations we've had over the past couple of years. And we teach this bot to say, okay, cool, this is how we'll route this is how we'll route that. But we are writing that hybrid model in terms of interfaces. I think from a tech perspective, we'll always lag in regards to full natural language communication. But as we build on certain modalities as well within the certain space, I think it will become a more natural interface for people to want to interact with on our side. So I think that hybrid model will work well over time for us. But as the bots get smarter, I think we will naturally get there where natural language is much easier. I mean, also we're in South Africa. I always make this example to say, for me to understand Ravi, I need to like Ravi, first, and understand him now and what he's saying and be willing to listen. So there's all those human physiological aspects we need to consider for this to be, as you would say, the number one interface for people to go to, but it is going the step in the right direction.
So I suppose the clear view here is that when we talk about natural language, chat can only go so far, and that it's the remaining senses that have to be engaged for us to truly find that it's potentially a substitute for human to human contact. And even when we talk about human to human contact, we've all gotten so used to Teams and Zoom's meetings with cameras a lot of the time switched off. we've actually missed that body language that we've been so used to. So it's actually the full scale of physiological responses.
Absolutely, absolutely.
No, it's very interesting. And Kosi, you know, in the discussions that we've had prior to the panel, you've, in addition to looking at external to your organization, you've specifically looked internally as well. Your views on the subject and how that's helped with specifically some of the internal populations that you've looked at?
Look, so I think internally, you know, our department hasn't really matured to that scale, whereas we are ready to utilize things like your NLP. But however, it is part of the programs that we are running. And the reason I say it's part of the programs we are running is that most projects that are given immediate attention from an exco level or a person who holds the purse are more about how does it actually affect the customer, right? So you'll find that more focus of an organization will always be about the outside, but we are forgetting that laying a foundation in the inside can translate to us actually growing either our client base from an outside perspective. For example, um, we've got an internal chatbot we call Dumi. So Dumi is our IT service desk chatbot and all of that. Now Dumi is good at solving certain problems that are really helping the guys to actually now start moving and getting on the go. But if I compare Dumi to what other teams are actually working in terms of enabling our clients to get expedient or quicker turnaround times in terms of their customer services, there's actually a gap there, right? Because, for example, certain things can be automated. Like what I like is that Sipo was speaking about chatbots currently in his area being a rule-based. In our side, it's rule-based, but it still has to be rule-based with an action that it triggers something to happen. For example, if I have a problem, let's say password resets. You know, that's the famous password resets. It's always the one that we look at, and we know a password. And I understand why it's a very small thing that's taken seriously, because a simple thing like resetting your password, if it takes you 15 minutes and you're frustrated because something is not being triggered, it just becomes a big of a problem. So what we've done is that we've created what's your problem? Resetting my password. Immediately, because you're chatting on you're chatting on your machine. If you're not chatting on your machine and you cannot actually realize the intent or even the security principle of your machine being connected to that, you just put in your employee number. From there on, it sends you a link that allows you to go into a portal. And all of that can actually happen in a space of 3 minutes, allowing you to actually be enabled. So most of the things that we have to do from an employee experience perspective is that we need to be more of a, if I do this, it triggers that in order for me to continue with my work so that I can serve the customer. And the lead time of me being able to do that, how does it translate to a customer happy index or the mean opinion score of the customer from how I actually help them, you know, to get that? Because I think we're in a day where things are digitized. People are wanting Uber service like services on their handheld devices, and if they're still getting the old way of doing things, then I mean you're not being innovative. So we are trying to make sure that we are an Uber-like service internally in order to actually replicate the same success for our customers in order for them to actually receive the best customer experience as possible. And I think NLP will help us in quite a lot. You know, I think first let us mature from a certain scale, and from there on we can start obviously going into the development of applying such in order to achieve. Because I think everybody was so excited, and it looked like it was only going to be a chatbot, it's going to end there. And everybody was like, I've done my best, you know, here I am, I'm a professional, forgetting that they actually have to do more research and development in order to enhance how this thing works so that they can actually be a leader in the market. And that's what I like about most of our competitors, is that they are edging towards that, you know, and they put in significant investment, either whether it's internally or externally.
And I think that as technology progresses, I always say to people that, you know, exponential change across both software and hardware means that more and more opportunities are opening up. And if we look at it, we're only in the probably the first half of the exponential curve on this. And as things get better and better, those opportunities are going to open up. And what I liked about what both you and Sipo were saying is that we need to be open to multimodal approaches to doing this, where even if a user has initially typed out a response, a more open-ended response, as quickly as possible, you converge them into, well, these are the potential options, and they don't have to type everything out. There is the use of buttons and voice and other things to be able to speed up that process and get better at it. So I think that's really important. One of the key challenges, and certainly I think it's across all organizations, both startup and incumbent, is trying to make sure that we're being as efficient as possible with regard to how we allow both our customers and our colleagues to engage with us, because the days of sort of phone calls and live agents, while clearly useful, is undoubtedly expensive. And we're trying, and I think most organizations, certainly ourselves at Nedbank as well, we are trying to look at where is the best place for humans to actually engage with humans, where is it necessary, and where does it add the best value? And therefore, where can these digital assistants play a role in terms of triaging and handling the easier to use capabilities, and certainly self-service, which both helps drive user confidence on digital channels and therefore drives that adoption and self-service element. So it becomes both more used as well as more efficient. At this point, how do you see the role of these digital assistants playing a role in that adoption and stickiness? And where are the kind of missing links right now that are still needed to be able to really drive home user confidence? Kosi, do you want to pick that up on your side first?
I identified that whole thing of an Uber-like service, which is something that's already hereditary to people. I mean, you want something, you go onto your phone, you get it. Transportation, food, it's even gone into courier services. And I think that's the expectation from, because it's become so natural to a person to utilize that. And not everybody, but majority of people who are digitally active on their devices, so once you create an ecosystem of having and proper catalogs that assist people in that manner, you're able to actually enhance the consumer experience, the customer experience in that regard. And I think where we are missing is that we become so bureaucratic with achieving certain things in our programs that we tend to omit things that, like, what is the sentiment detection in terms of a person utilizing this, as they're utilizing this, how concentrated are they on their device? Because based on the number of responses, you also need to look at your mean time to respond and your mean time to resolve. And I take it like that because mean time to respond is how quick can your chatbot or whatever you've got there from a conversational AI perspective, how quick does it actually respond back to the customer? Because now it comes back to that thing that you're talking about, that how there's a time to speak to human, there's a time to engage to a technology, but how do you mimic that engagement from a human perspective? I mean, sentiment detection will be a bit hard to get in that, but I think if you look at your turnaround time, your round trip from when the enter button was sent and it got to you, how quick can, through obviously now, there's a lot of things that you can utilize from an infrastructure perspective to get that latency going back to the customer. How quick can it respond and not get them waiting? Because I think we've seen it, and we're seeing that quite a lot, that you put something here is, for example, our good old, we're going into tax season right now, okay, as an example. Now, our good old taxman has got a nice, wonderful chatbot that is there, but it takes a while to come back to you, and that's a frustration for a customer. But no customer is coming back and saying to the organization, it's a frustration for us. Even from a software quality engineering perspective, that is not part of the use case from a test plan perspective. The test plan is saying, is it coming back with that response? You get what I'm saying? It is not looking at Norman, it's taking too long. You don't look at those things. And I think those are the type of things that we need to start digging deeper into. And if we dig deeper into it, I'm telling you, within the next 3 years, the utilization of the technology would be so great that the only thing that you start having now, you don't have service desk consultants anymore. You start having service desk data consultants or chatbot or conversational analysts who are looking at, okay, these are the words, these are the different types of questions that are being asked, and this is how we can enhance the customer experience, and that's a very untapped area, and nobody in the market, even from a consultancy perspective, I being a former consultant myself for the past 11 years, I have never came back and with a solution that speaks to that. But now that I'm close to it, and I utilize the tools, and I'm like, oh gosh, it actually took me 20 minutes to get something that maybe if I picked up a call, it could have been answered much quicker. Or maybe like from an MTN perspective, they're utilizing WhatsApp chats. Maybe in that functionality, enabling the WhatsApp call from that chat to actually route it to an agent, maybe that could have made it better, but it's taking me backwards, and that's not where we want to drive people. So we just need to look at how and what it means for the client. And it doesn't have to mean a big thing. It has to mean just the thing that moves them forward.
And Sipho, in terms of adoption, I once heard the example that said, if somebody approaches a staff member or is on the phone, you can pretty quickly tell the tone and how annoyed or potentially how irritated that person is, and you can adapt accordingly. And the sentiment analysis that Kosi talked about is important. In chat, obviously, that's a bit more challenging because tone doesn't translate. But is there any way to then look at your CRM capabilities to find out, well, what has this user been doing with us recently? And might he be potentially upset or annoyed, etc., that something's gone wrong? So how does that play a role in both getting a better outcome for the customer in that engagement, and therefore then keeping them sticky and wanting to use this channel even more? I think you're on mute, Sibo.
So sorry. How many times have we said that over the past few years?
It wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been a call if it didn't come in some way.
Yeah. I think it's considerably a great opportunity, right? And not only to grow or adapt digital interfaces for conversations, but for our broader digital channels. So I'm always hitting on data points on how do we resolve something. Now your CRM and the calls that come to your call center are a strong data point, right? And in that we kind of can translate how we're interacting with our customers. What do they want, right? And if you use voice calls, for an example, then we can start bringing in other modalities. So when I have one of the designers in my team to say, we are solving for people who want to block their SIM cards, for an example. So if I would get my designer to listen to those conversations for a day to say, this is what you do today, this is your research, the output of the conversation that they'll be designing will already have the tone, what people say, keywords, and all of that. So all those data points that will come from the CRM can contribute to how the journey plays out and how well the customer will receive us, right? Which is very important. I think it's one of the main things I think chatbots would have a one over any channel as we go into the future, because the personality of a bot, how it talks, right? And again, it's one of those things where you can't have a personality for everyone, but the bot is expected to, because it talks to everyone, right? So and the best thing also to do in those specific examples is to carry it use case by use case. Each and every use case, if I'm talking about money, you are in areas, Ravi, how do I now carry that conversation and that tone? It should be different throughout because I understand that total use case. So things like that, if I made you feel comfortable by collecting money in areas, right, whereas you are very nervous to chat to a human about it, right, because it's a personal situation, you'll come back to my channel, right? So it can contribute greatly to digital adaptation in that sense, with the example I've given, where we are able to get context and introduce extra modalities with our words based on the type of use case we've done. And we've got good data points to do that research as to how we'll design a proper conversation to make Ravi feel comfortable about his money issues when talking to our bot. Whereas a normal interface, it's just a normal interface, couple of buttons, a structured layout. There's no tone there. So the words do give us those extra modalities as well. And we are able to significantly get good data points to design the right tone and words for your particular use case, right? Therefore, this is a channel in the future. If we get this right for the different use cases, people will keep coming back because we create a sense of comfort and understanding of solving that particular service or problem they need from us.
And George, I'm sure all of this is a key part of how Kazisto is thinking about this as you take us forward. I mean, how much of this is playing a role? And if I can just add an additional question in there, what is the potential role of vernacular in terms of helping to take this forward, the adoption, the confidence, the reuse on this?
No, absolutely. I mean, just to echo a lot of what we've heard here, right? You know, good adoption is not going to come just from being able to self-service, right? In my experience, at least, you know, financial institutions, you know, that have reached that strongest level of adoption with their digital assistant really took that digital assistant and put it at the focal point of their customers' servicing strategy, their marketing strategy, their branding strategy, right? You know, that digital assistant really needs to become the face of the institution, embody it. It needs to have an identity. It needs to have a personality. It needs to be responsive. It needs to connect to your customers in their own vernacular. You know, it needs to be personable. You know, but there's even more to this, right? You know, even if you get all of these things right, there is the question of, you know, do you have strong buy-in from within the institution to really make this assistant part of your team? You know, are employees able to think about this assistant as their best banker, right? Our call center staff, our branch staff, are they advocate of that assistant, right? You know, are they promoting that assistant? In a recent example, at Casisto, a regional bank in the US that recently launched their digital assistant, Rita. I mean, they had human-sized cardboard cutouts of Rita, you know, standing in their branches, all employees excited to talk about Rita to that customer that would walk in, right? And so it's really about approaching it across all channels, right? Because, you know, just by marketing online, right, you're not going to reach that person that's used to ultimately going to the branch or making that phone call, right? And so you really need to have that buy-in internally and being able to drive adoption. And so all of these things are ultimately going to make it into just the key criteria that are going to ultimately make the assistant a success, that's or not, right?
So meeting the customer where they currently are and
Absolutely.
creating a bridge to the customer is quite critical in your mind to be able to drive that adoption.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, having the assistant be good at what it does is just the foundation, right? There is the everything else that comes with it that's just critical, equally critical, if not more, right, to ultimately get that that ROI from an adoption perspective, right?
Yeah. And Sipo, from a vernacular perspective, have you seen any? How are you at NPN? I mean, you're operating across 22 opcos, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not sure how widespread the use of the WhatsApp chatbot is. But what have you found from a research perspective in terms of vernacular and the need for local vernacular in terms of understanding and engagement?
No, it's absolute, right? And it's expected of our clients because we do serve them in other channels with their own language, right? And it's imperative for us, obviously, to have this bot be able to do that. And from a group perspective, the bot internally has the capability to adapt to French, Zulu, and we have the tech capability. And because, I mean, as you would understand, the first version of our bot is for all of us to share, and English is common to all of us for now, at least, right? Which is a world principle for now within the westernized nations, including here in Africa as well. So we are, and we will introduce more vernacular languages to match what we match. To match what we have on the other channels, because it's what the customer expects, rather. And it's going to be a strong focus for us. I mean, over and above that, also accessibility, right, to people. Over and above the vernacular language, accessibility is also a huge thing we're focusing on so that the bot has a reach and we don't have limitations of language or disabilities.
Yeah, and also I'm imagining it's not much different from from your perspective, although obviously in financial services specifically, especially when it comes to discussions around products, etc., we do have to look at a language where there is a legal framework. But how have you seen the role of local vernacular being important in terms of driving engagement and stickiness?
You see, it's quite important, but I think at the moment it is we have an unconscious bias of utilizing one language because we assume we have the assumption that everybody is literate in the global language, which most of the time being English, right? And I think that's also where we need to start actually looking at how can we set up teams for that. Obviously, like I'm saying, it's also a challenge of the person of the purse, this time being the CFO. You go speak to them about this, I think from the financial governance perspective. And we know how it's like. We're in the IT industry. Sometimes we go ask for something we're not given. We go ask for a toy and we're not given up until the toy becomes a password, and then we're given that toy to play with. And that always becomes the case. But I think from a vernacular perspective, it's quite important because uh, we need to be inclusive. We live in a diverse, yeah, especially, I mean, look at South Africa alone. Let's not even go into Africa. Let us look at the number of official languages that are utilized there. Um, there's an exercise that I once ran with a client, and we realized that there are four other languages that are mostly utilized more than English to ask questions, and that actually ended up in the chat being abandoned, right? For example, we know the languages that are close to each other are basically Zulu. We know that is utilized quite a lot. That is followed by a combination of Sotho, Tswana, and Pedi because they are very relatively close to each other. We've seen chats going in that manner being abandoned, whether it was somebody trying to play around with whatever it is, but at least it opened up light to that. Then we saw a I once even got an intent that actually says "Ekani Engels prati," which means I can't speak English. So then we saw Afrikaans also being another language that is utilized there. And I mean, those are the three top languages that I think need to be expanded on, right? And either be part of an initiated chat like you'd find in an automated teller machine. You can withdraw in any language, and I think we just need to take it back to how they are expecting to interact, because a person who is not as as literate as you are, as me and you are, but they know how to utilize solutions like your WhatsApp chat, so they know how to utilize any type of form of chat on their smart devices. We also got to take them back to when they are at an ATM, how that reciprocates back to that, because we can't serve you different in one channel and then we want to serve you different in the other. I think we just need to be consistent in our customer service approach in that regard. So it's something that we look into, but obviously we would know from an internal perspective, the expectation is that you need to know a certain language, and that is going to be the language that we are going to utilize because of obviously the dynamics that are involved there. But from a customer experience perspective, it requires significant investment. Let us be inclusive and not omit people, and that's what's happening. We're omitting a whole lot of the population, and that will actually we're not seeing the extent of it. Is that we say our digital drive, we're going to drop this solution and it's going to be driven. No, it's actually people who drive that, and if we're not including people to drive that, then we're already losing the digital conversation. And we are letting them become very despondent as the customer, and we don't want our customers to be like that. So we must be consistent in our approach and look at how we can actually expand on that.
No, absolutely. And whilst we could spend the entire day talking about this, the time does fly when you're having fun. So for a final question, what I'd like all of us to do is to whip out our crystal balls and just ask ourselves the question, if we look on a sort of a 5 to 10 year horizon, where do we think the space is moving into, and what will the capability set for users actually look like in that time period? And both from our own ecosystem perspective, but also from a technology perspective, where do we think we're going? So I'll go with Sipho first. And I think at exactly that moment, Sipho has frozen. So Percy, do you want to pick it up?
Oh, I like how Sipho's like a statue there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll all be in our spaceships, you know, but nah, just joking. Whew, 10 years, in the next 10 years. You know, I think we will have adopted the utilization of the technology. For example, WhatsApp is nothing new. We had Mixit back in the days. It just never grew that traction. I think if the appetite is there to become digitally, you know, how can I say, digitally fluent as a community, I think we'll be we'll be hitting, and especially with the rapid growth of, you know, being connected to the internet. You see fiber to the home in the street posts. People are starting to get more connected, and the fiber prices are, I mean, internet and data prices are even going down. So in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm actually seeing the adoption of this being quite high. I think it's actually even going to be on a point whereas from a conversational perspective, you won't even have a call center agent speaking back to you. I think sentiment analysis and detection will have risen from that based on voice patterns. You know, we'll start actually having intelligent contact centers coming into place. We will start seeing a whole lot of things being automated from a chat perspective to even increase the revenue of most organization, where it's not even about now the interaction, but it's about how much money can we make pay intent, you know, just like a YouTube blogger who is subscribing, you know, how many people are actually calling in to utilize your service, and your resolution, you know, how does it translate into the profitability of that? Because we know that data obviously becomes monetized, and our voice is also data as we go along, you know, and an entity relationship modeling of that is actually going to show how profitable that can be. And I think customer service is going to be a totally different ball game embedded into conversational AI in the next 5 to 10 years.
So, I'm assuming that earlier your crystal ball was obviously using a bit of your bandwidth. So, what did it tell you about the next 5 to 10 years?
I think as people first adapt to being served by these bots, and people expect it to be bots, and they know it's bots, it will become easier over time for us to communicate the message to say you're going to be serviced by a bot. Parallel, the bot is getting more intelligent, getting fed with more information, understanding sentiment, like Mr. Malifa said, right? So I think over time, it will be really where people go and how and really want to be serviced in that way, because it will be the closest to talking to a human, right? Rather than just looking at an interface. But we need time for it to build. Like a little child that learns to talk, right? We probably now maybe 1 or 2 years old. We know a couple of words, you know. We can tell how we're relating emotionally with our parents a bit, when they're mad, when they're not mad, what we should say, how we should move around certain conversations. So our bot's like a toddler that is growing, and our bot technology will also go through those transitions and those phases. And in the next 10 years, they'll be entering the teenage state. And they'll be able to translate and understand most things for customers, and they'll be go-to, and people will entrust them with conversations and solving their problems within big corporates.
And George, to close out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, given the scale of investment in this space and just the speed of innovation, you know, it's obviously very difficult to predict where we'll be in 5 years, let alone 10. But I mean, my best guess, like many of the folks what we've heard here, I mean, digital assistants are certainly going to be ubiquitous. They're going to be available everywhere. they will be a lot more personalized and hyper personalizing the experience to your individual needs. They will be ingesting a lot more data, not just from the institution that has deployed it, but probably connecting with third parties. In the case of the financial services world, right? You can imagine, NetBank's assistant connecting to the credit bureau data, also ingesting perhaps, data from social media platforms and conversations happening there, right? And being effectively a lot more intelligent, as Sif was said, about the conversation that it's having with that customer that's interacting with NetBank, right? And that assistant is also in the process going to become a lot better at segmenting customers, segmenting users, identifying personas, clustering them, creating cohorts to drive that personalization of the experience, right? The assistants are going to probably become, they're going to have broad and ambient context awareness. They will know where you're coming in from, what your needs are. They will be a lot better at anticipating your needs, and they will be ultimately a lot more engaging, proactive, and effective at fulfilling people's needs. It's definitely an exciting space, and there's a lot of room to improve, to go from where we're at. But that's at least my best guess on where we'll be in the coming years.
So this is recorded, and as they say, what happens in Teams or any of these meetings will never stay there, and I'm sure it'll be pulled out in a couple of years to see how accurate we are. But thank you very, very much to all three of you for giving us the time. I think this was a great conversation, certainly very thought-provoking, and look forward to chatting to you all again maybe next year to see. To get a sense of the progress that we've all been making in the space. Thanks very much. And so with that, we'll return back to the conference.
Thank you, guys. That was great.